Big Brother is watching you. We've all heard that phrase, right? That quiet, creepy whisper from classic literature. But what if I told you it's not science fiction anymore? What if I told you it's a reality orbiting hundreds of miles above our heads right now? Go ahead, look up. Maybe you don't see anything, but imagine this. You're at a barbecue. You drop a hot dog on the ground. You quickly look around. Nobody. You pick it up, brushing off dirt, 5-second rule, and somewhere above, a bus sized telescope just captured that embarrassing moment. Yes, that's how advanced they've become. They're spy satellites. Hundreds orbit above us. Today, we'll find out who controls them, how they manage to become invisible, and whether it's true they can watch us even inside our house.
These incredible machines didn't just appear because scientists were curious. They were born from something much more powerful: pure, uncut fear. Let's set the stage. It's the 1950s. The tension was so thick, people probably eyed their toaster suspiciously, wondering if it was a Soviet spy. This wasn't just fear, it was paranoia, and that paranoia was the fuel. It's the peak of the Cold War. Everyone on both sides is terrified of a surprise nuclear attack. The US needed to know what the Soviets were building behind the Iron Curtain. It wasn't a nice to have, it was a survival issue. How many ICBMs did they have? Where were the bomber bases? Were they about to launch a first strike? The US government's best bet was the U-2 spy plane, a beautiful, terrifying machine that flew at the edge of space over 70,000 feet above. But here's the problem: it was slow and vulnerable. In 1960, the inevitable happened. A U-2 piloted by Francis Gary Powers was blown out of the sky by a Soviet missile. I want you to really let that sink in. This was a full-blown international crisis, a massive, humiliating black eye for the Eisenhower administration. It was a real Houston, we have a problem moment for US intelligence. Their best eyes were blind. They had to go higher. There was only one solution left: space. So, in absolute total secrecy, the race was on. In August 1960, after dozens of failed, heartbreaking, and ridiculously expensive launches, the first successful Corona satellite finally went up. But you can't just tell the world you're launching a spy satellite. So they created a cover story. A brilliant one, actually. It was called the Discoverer Program. Just a friendly civilian science project studying, I don't know, cosmic weather or something. It was, of course, total nonsense. And I want you to appreciate the human drama here. This wasn't just a tech demo. This was the work of hundreds of engineers, scientists, and pilots working around the clock. These people genuinely believed the fate of the free world rested on their shoulders. They felt that if they failed, World War III was next. It was a desperate, heroic, last-ditch gamble. And the technology they came up with? It was equal parts brilliant and completely insane. The Corona satellite, flying incredibly low, about 90 miles up, just skimming the top of the atmosphere, was literally taking pictures on photographic film. Yes, just like your grandpa's old Kodak. The camera itself was a marvel, giving them a resolution of about 6 feet, good enough to spot a bomber on a runway. But here's the billion-dollar question. How did you get the film back from space?
Well, this is my favorite part of the story. When the film ran out, the satellite would eject a special capsule, a film bucket, weighing up to 250 pounds, back to Earth. This capsule would deploy a parachute. And here's the crazy part. Air Force C-119 planes, known as flying boxcars, would catch these capsules in mid-air. I'm not kidding. They called it mid-air retrieval. I call it Sky Circus. Can you imagine being that pilot flying at 30,000 feet trying to snag a 250-pound bucket that just fell from space. It's not like catching a baseball. You miss, and the one piece of intel that could prevent nuclear Armageddon, sploosh, ends up at the bottom of the Pacific. No pressure, right?
It was dangerous, it was heroic, and it was something straight out of a movie. But it worked. And it was worth every ounce of risk. That very first successful Corona mission, which was Discover 14 by the way, delivered more intelligence data than all previous U-2 flights combined. And a single roll of film snagged over the Pacific Ocean changed the course of world history. It revealed the Soviets had far fewer ICBMs than was previously thought, calming fears of a missile gap. It gave President Kennedy the confidence he needed during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Just like that, a roll of film that literally fell from space saved the world. That insane sky circus was a brilliant fix, but it was slow. You had to wait weeks, sometimes months, for that bucket to drop. In a world of instant crisis, that's an eternity. A permanent, super secret, ultra fast solution was needed. But how could they build this next generation of spy tech without the whole world, especially the Soviets, finding out? The answer? Create an agency so secret it practically didn't exist. So, in 1961, in even deeper secrecy, one of the most powerful and secretive agencies on Earth was created. You've heard of the CIA, NSA, and FBI, but have you heard of the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO? Probably not, and that was the whole point. The NRO became the absolute fortress of space intelligence. It brought together the best engineers, the sharpest optics experts, and the most paranoid analysts, all working under a blanket of secrecy that makes the CIA look like a bunch of gossips. This brings us to one of our key questions. Who operates US spy satellites? It's the NRO. They are the builders and the operators. But what is this agency? Get this, the US government did not publicly acknowledge the NRO's existence until 1992. Let me repeat that. For 31 years, an entire government agency with a budget of billions of dollars was building and launching the most advanced technology in human history. And for 3 decades, officially, it didn't exist.
Think about that. It's the most successful gaslighting in government history. It's like finding out your quiet neighbor spent 30 years building an aircraft carrier in his backyard, and when asked, just said, "What aircraft carrier? What backyard?" That's what the NRO was doing, just in space. Its black budget is estimated at over 10 billion per year. And its official motto, only declassified recently, tells you everything you need to know. We own the night. If you ask me, that sounds more like a motto for a supervillain from a B-grade comic book than a government agency. But there it is. And they weren't kidding.
The NRO got to work fast. They moved beyond Corona, the KH-1 through 4 series, to new programs. The KH-7 Gambit, and the truly massive KH-9 Hexagon, with crews nicknamed Big Bird, delivered ridiculously high-res images for their time, achieving resolutions of less than 1 foot, still using film, but better and better. But the real leap, the one that defines modern surveillance, happened in 1976. This was the birth of the KH-11 Keyhole. Yes, Keyhole is the real codename series. Why was this satellite a game changer? It was the first digital spy satellite. No more film canisters. No more mid-air circus acts. This was point, click, send. The Cold War just got a serious upgrade. The wait time for intelligence went from weeks to minutes. So, with this new digital power, how close can this eye really see? The answer's shocking. Publicly available data, leaked information, and expert analysis suggest that modern KH-11 series satellites can detect objects as small as a few inches. Some estimates range from 2 to 4 inches. Let me put that in perspective for you, because a few inches doesn't do it justice. That is the equivalent of you standing in Washington, D.C. and being able to read a newspaper held by someone in Miami, Florida. It's hard to even comprehend. We're not talking about just counting cars in a parking lot. We're talking about reading a license plate. We're not talking about seeing if a person is there. We're talking about being able to tell what they are carrying. This is more than just tracking. This is near omniscience orbiting above us. So that brings up the next logical question. What is inside these satellites? If you're picturing something refrigerator-sized, think much, much bigger. The NRO's reconnaissance satellites are titans. They're true engineering marvels. A modern keyhole satellite can weigh 10 to 15 tons. That's the weight of 2 large African elephants or a fully loaded cement truck. And they can be as long as a full-size school bus, 40 feet or even more. Why so big? Physics. To get that read a newspaper from Miami resolution, you need a massive mirror to collect as much light as possible. And here's the kicker. The primary mirrors inside these KH-11 satellites are believed to be identical in size to the one inside the Hubble Space Telescope. That's a mirror of 7.9 feet across. But unlike Hubble, which looks out at distant galaxies, these telescopes are pointed right back at us. Right at what's happening in your backyard.
And here's the ultimate irony, which I just found hilarious and terrifying at the same time. In 2012, NASA, the civilian space agency, made a stunning announcement. The NRO had donated 2 spare Hubble-class telescopes to them. They were just lying around, unused, gathering dust in a secret, climate-controlled warehouse. Can you imagine that phone call? Hey, NASA, it's the NRO. Yeah, listen, we were doing some spring cleaning and we found 2 spare space telescopes. Military grade, better than Hubble. You guys want them?
The reaction from the scientific community was, well, it was chaos. NASA had been begging Congress for cash for years, fighting tooth and nail for every single dollar for new telescopes. And the NRO, this silent agency next door, just had 2 of them sitting in a warehouse, unused. And here's the real twist. They were actually better than Hubble for certain tasks. When astronomers found out, they were simultaneously ecstatic and furious. It's like you've been saving up for a decade to buy a used Ford Focus, and then you find out your quiet relative has 2 brand new Bugattis in his garage that he just used to get groceries. One of them is now being repurposed for deep space exploration. It's the ultimate proof that the line between deep space astronomy and global espionage has always been razor thin. And to get those perfect, crystal clear images, the optical sensors inside have to stay very cold. That's why these satellites use advanced cooling systems, chilling their detectors to far below freezing. Why? Because when you're spending billions on a photo, you don't want it coming out grainy, right? It's obsessive perfectionism. I think I can hear the iPhone camera developers crying right now after hearing about this tech. Okay, so if these things are the size of a school bus, why don't we see them flying overhead all the time? After all, you can see the International Space Station that looks like a bright, fast-moving star. Well, this is one of the most mysterious parts of space reconnaissance. The NRO doesn't just build giants, it builds space ghosts. In the 1990s, a program codenamed MISTY, sometimes referred to by analysts as KH-17, was allegedly launched. These satellites were designed for one purpose: stealth. Stealth in space means being invisible to radar and optical telescopes. How? Using a combination of technologies. First, the satellite itself, experts assume, was coated in radar-absorbing material, or RAM. A special paint mixed with ferrite and carbon particles, just like a stealth bomber to soak up radar signals. Second, it's believed MISTY deployed a massive inflatable shield, or cone. This shield, made of thin, high-tech polymer, flew alongside the satellite and was designed to intercept enemy radar beams and deflect them into empty space, so no echo ever returned to Earth. Here's the creepy part. Amateur astronomers, these are brilliant guys with powerful backyard equipment, actually spotted one of these objects in 1990. They tracked it, they shared the data, and then one day it just vanished. Imagine how many of these invisible ghosts are playing hide and seek above our heads right now. And you have to understand, these amateur astronomers aren't just guys with binoculars. It's a global, almost paranoid community of people calling themselves skywatchers. They exchange data via encrypted chats. They dedicate their lives to catching the NRO in the act. For the NRO, these people are a constant headache. Imagine, you spend $10 billion on a black project, and some physics teacher from Ohio finds it in his backyard with a homemade telescope and posts the orbit online. It's a real cat and mouse game. There are rumors that the NRO started launching decoys alongside real satellites just to confuse these amateurs. It's a shadow war nobody talks about.
Alright, so they can see at the daytime, but what about at night? What about a storm or just a cloudy day in a strategically important region? A spy satellite that only works in good weather isn't very useful. This is where synthetic aperture radar SAR comes in. Think of SAR satellites as a bat. They work on echolocation but with cosmic precision. They don't see light. They fire microwave signals at Earth and then use their orbital motion to build a complex 3D picture from the reflections. The result? They can see through rain, snow, smoke, and most importantly, total darkness. This means if an enemy thinks they can build a secret nuclear facility at night, or move a column of tanks under the cover of a hurricane, the NRO sees it just as clearly as if it were a sunny afternoon. There is quite literally nowhere to hide.
So the KH-11s are the eyes. The SAR satellites see in the dark. But what about the ears? Meet the Orion system, also known as Mentor. These are signals intelligence, SIGINT satellites. They're parked way out in geostationary orbit, about 22,236 miles above the equator. From there, a single one can monitor an entire third of the planet at once. They don't take pictures, they listen. To pick up faint signals from the ground, like a cell phone call or a military radio, they unfurl colossal antennas. And when I say colossal, I mean it. Some of these antennas are estimated to be the size of a football field. These are giant, delicate electronic spiderwebs, just soaking up information. If an enemy commander gives an order over the radio, if a missile silo in North Korea powers up its targeting radar, Orion hears it, records it, and sends it to the analyst at the National Security Agency, NSA. Think about that. Every unsecured military communication anywhere on 1/3 of the globe is potentially being fed into these giant space ears. George Orwell could only dream of this level of surveillance. He was worried about microphones on the walls. These guys are listening to an entire continent from space. But here's the real problem with having a football field-sized ear. It hears everything. Not just the enemy general's phone call, but also every taxi dispatch, every civilian radio station, every microwave oven, and every angry ham radio operator complaining about the government. The amount of raw data flooding down from these things is a petabyte-level nightmare. It's not finding a needle in a haystack, it's finding one specific needle in a continent-sized haystack made of other needles. For decades, this was the NSA's biggest headache. They were recording so much data that they couldn't possibly get enough humans to listen to it all. They were drowning in secrets they couldn't even use. However, a certain technology starting with A and ending with I is about to change that. But we'll get to the scary part later.
So, how many spy satellites does US have? The exact number, of course, is classified, but experts estimate that NRO operates over 100 major reconnaissance satellites. This includes the optical eyes, the radar all-weather satellites, and those giant ear satellites. And they don't just fly around randomly. Their orbits are chosen with surgical precision. Many of them fly in sun-synchronous orbits, SSO. This is a brilliant orbital path. It means they pass over the exact same spot on Earth at the exact same local time every single day. Why? It gives analysts perfectly consistent lighting for comparison photos. They can see if one new truck has arrived at a secret base because the shadow will look different. It's not just surveillance, it's the world's most expensive game of spot the difference.
What if they need to watch the northern territories? A standard low orbit zips by too fast, so they use a Molniya orbit. The orbit is called that because the Soviet Union first used it in the 1960s for its Molniya series of communication satellites. It's a long elliptical path. The satellite swings in fast and low, then flies its way out, hovering for hours at its highest point over the northern latitudes, just staring down at targets. It's the orbital equivalent of that creepy guy in a movie who just stands across the street motionless, staring at the window for hours. It's efficient, though it's kinda chilling. But the US isn't alone up there. This raises a big question. Who owns most of the world's satellites? It's not just governments anymore. The game has totally changed. A common question, is Starlink 100% owned by SpaceX? Yes, and companies like SpaceX with Starlink have thousands of satellites. And while they're commercial, as seen in the war in Ukraine, they are absolutely critical for military communications. This gives the US a huge advantage. So, who has the most spy satellites in the world? When it comes to high-end government-owned spy satellites, the US is still the undisputed king with its NRO fleet. But this is the big scary question in Washington right now. Is China ahead of the US in space? The answer for now is no, but. The US still has the edge in those exquisite high-precision optical satellites thanks to the NRO's decades of experience. But China is catching up fast. They're building their own massive surveillance network called Galfin, and, more worryingly, they're aggressively developing anti-satellite technologies. They're testing satellites with grappling arms, lasers, and missiles to destroy other satellites. This is Cold War 2.0, but it's happening in total silence, hundreds of miles up. Whoever controls the orbit controls the planet. And this high-tech game is incredibly dangerous. Sometimes these billion-dollar projects suffer spectacular failures. In 2008, a brand new top-secret NRO satellite, USA-193, malfunctioned shortly after launch. It was a dead bird falling back to Earth. This wasn't just an expensive piece of space junk. The problem was its fuel tank. It was loaded with over 1,000 pounds of highly toxic hydrazine fuel, and there was a very real danger that this 1,000-pound tank would survive re-entry, crash land somewhere, maybe a populated area, and poison an entire city block. It was an environmental time bomb. The US solution was unprecedented. On February 20th, 2008, the US Navy cruiser USS Lake Erie in the Pacific fired a single SM-3 missile and shot its own satellite out of the sky. The official reason was public safety, and I'm sure that was part of it, but everyone in the world knew what it really was. The most audacious "don't mess with us" message to China and Russia. A live-fire public demonstration of anti-satellite capabilities right in front of the whole world. This puts the US in a very exclusive, very dangerous club of countries that can shoot down satellites.
Okay, time for the question you've all been waiting for, the Hollywood myth. Can satellites see a person inside a house? The answer, thankfully, is no. It's pure 100% Hollywood fiction. Here's why. The KH-11s are optical. They are, at their core, giant telescopes. They need a line of sight. They can't see through your roof any more than your own eyes can. Radar satellites can see through clouds and smoke, but cannot penetrate dense, solid materials like concrete walls, thick roofs, or even a few feet of earth. They do not have X-ray vision, like Superman. It's physically impossible with current known technology. So relax. They can see you drop the hot dog, but they cannot see you eating it in the kitchen pretending nothing happened.
Okay, so maybe they don't have Superman's X-ray vision yet, but even without it, these things are arguably the most powerful surveillance tools ever created. Which begs the real important question: who gets the keys to this car? Does the CIA have spy satellites? This is a good one. Historically, yes, the CIA was a primary driver and customer for the early Corona program. But today, no. All US spy satellites are built and operated by the NRO. The CIA is a customer. They are a key consumer of the data. They, along with the NSA and Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, receive images and intelligence from the NRO and use them to plan missions, analyze threats, and write the daily briefs for the White House. It's a very practical, very secret team. This brings up a good point about who controls what in space. A lot of people get the NRO, military intel, confused with NASA, civilian science. Can the president tell NASA what to do? Absolutely. The president sets the ultimate vision, but this also leads to budget drama. Like, did Obama cut NASA funding? This is a common misconception. The short answer is no, he didn't cut it. In fact, his 2010 budget increased NASA's overall funding. What he did do was cancel the Constellation program, the Bush-era plan to return to the moon. He redirected that money toward commercial crew programs and new rocket development. It was a massive pivot. People were furious. They said he was abandoning the moon. Yes, because the moon will be really lonely without us humans. Nevertheless, it was a huge political gamble. But that gamble, that's the only reason SpaceX is now launching American astronauts, it was a massive dramatic shift that paid off, and the US no longer depends on Russian Soyuz rockets for crewed flights. We've talked a lot about espionage and military power. It's all very intense, and for good reason. But there's a silver lining to all this. While these systems are built for war, their data is often used to save people. NRO images are used for disaster response. After a hurricane, they can track an oil spill. They show firefighters the accurate scale and direction of a wildfire, allowing them to evacuate towns. They also monitor the global climate crisis, tracking the retreat of glaciers and the changing landscapes. And in a final beautiful twist, those first top-secret Corona images from the 1960s, they're all declassified now. Scientists are using that 60-year-old spy footage to study how our planet has changed. Espionage has literally become archaeology. A nice happy ending, right? Wrong, because that was the past, and the future is far wilder and far more unsettling. This isn't the ending, this is the dramatic climax. Modern reconnaissance is no longer just about identifying an object, it's about predicting action, and modern intel gets a massive boost from artificial intelligence. AI can detect patterns a human would miss. It can spot tiny, subtle changes in the soil around a military base, which could signal they're preparing a missile launch. It can notice that guard patrol patterns have suddenly changed. AI can process terabytes of data that would take a team of 100 humans weeks to analyze, and it can spit out a conclusion in minutes. They're turning these satellites from simple eyes into a forecasting tool. They're not just watching what happened, they're trying to predict what will happen next.
Why all this? Why the black budgets, the Hubble-sized mirrors, the football field antennas, and invisible ghosts? For decades, the answer was simple: to buy time. Time is what stands between peaceful diplomacy and all-out war. A picture from a KH-11 can stop a missile that's already in the air, but it can see the missile being moved to the launch pad. It can give a president days, not hours, to react. This isn't theory. The satellite data was reportedly critical in tracking and locating Osama bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad. Before the 2022 invasion, it was US satellite imagery that showed the world the massive, undeniable buildup of Russian forces on the border with Ukraine. It exposed their plans months in advance, and it gave Ukraine and its allies vital life-saving time to prepare. The mission is no longer just to see and know, but to predict what will happen next. So how advanced are US spy satellites really? They are so advanced that they can see your dropped hot dog from 200 miles, see through total darkness, listen with football field-sized ears, and use artificial intelligence to try to predict the future. What was science fiction yesterday is reality today. If you found this journey into the world of secret space tech interesting, don't float away. Check out the rest of our videos. We've got more fascinating stories, orbit-worthy secrets, and mind-blowing facts waiting for you.